Prepare yourself for this now by storing all the things you need. Put them in your fallout room or stacked up within easy reach close by.
Hello everyone, welcome to the first episode of Tocsin Bang, Tales from the Bunker. This is going to be a weekly or bi-weekly live stream where I talk to Cold War enthusiasts. I will also be talking to ex-members of the Royal Observer Corps and Civil Defence. Hopefully there will be some other guests coming in as well from the fields of archaeology and battlefield exploration as well. So without further ado, let me bring in my first guest, and that is Ed Coombs from Cuckfield ROC Monitoring Post Museum in West Sussex. Ed, welcome to the show.
Hi Al, good to see you.
Yes, good to see you, mate. It's been, I think the last time I was with you was back in November, was it, of last year?
Yes, and something like that. Mid-November, I think. You came over for the weekend. We sorted out some bits and pieces of kit.
Yeah, it's been a bit of an odd one now. But obviously, you and I should have had probably 4 or 5 open days under our belts by now.
Yep, and I'll be teeing up to come over to you for the European Heritage Open Days. When's that usually? It's in another week or two. Would be normally.
I think it's the first weekend in September, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
It's usually the weekend when the kids go back to school. That's usually the weekend when it happens. So it's a bit of a strange one.
Yeah, and I've had to miss a few things this year, but but anyway, it's worked out in other ways. We've had some nice online events and a bit of downtime really to do some post maintenance after lockdown and all that sort of thing. So
I saw photographs. You did some painting and bits and pieces on your post recently, didn't you?
Yeah, repainted a lot of the internals, fitted a couple of new bits of equipment, or test fitted a couple of new bits of equipment ready for open days next year. Yeah, we try and do something new, so that every year there's something new for people to see if there's repeat visitors and so on. Just change a display board or put a new bit of equipment or repaint something or whatever, just to keep it.
Yeah, this year has sort of been particularly disruptive in that we did have a lot of new stuff to show off.
Yeah,
and which is the real annoying part of it. And yes, okay, there's been, with everything going on in the world, I think things like ROC monitoring posts can't take a back seat, but it's one of those things that you've got all this stuff that you want to show people and tell people about, and I think that's one of the reasons why I started doing this, because this gives you a little bit of a glimpse into it.
Definitely.
I had said on Facebook, obviously I would say to people why I called the show Tocsin Bang. Tocsin was the code word that was given by the underground, the monitoring posts, if they had detected a nuclear explosion.
Yeah, that's correct.
In the headquarters, the code word was Tocsin Bang, and that's if they had detected an explosion. Now, hopefully I get this right, from Audrey, which was basically a computer that detected a nuclear detonation if it was in the area around the headquarters, and that stood for Atomic Weapon Detection, Recognition and Estimation of Yield.
Yeah, that's the one.
And I didn't write that down. I was tempted to write it down, but it didn't.
So much easier to say.
It is, yes. So because I am doing this, I'm not doing this from the post. I am doing it from the headquarters. I thought Tocsin Bang would be the better thing to put. So perfect. That's the reason why it's called that. Yeah, right perfect. Now, Ed, you have sent me quite a few photographs. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take my ugly mug off this side of the screen and I'm going to put photographs up. If at any point you want to sort of talk about the photograph in a bit more detail, I will put the photograph full screen and you can talk about it more. But if you want to kick us off and tell us about the history of Cuckfield, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. In a nutshell, sort of, Cuckfield was one of the earlier posts to be established in the UK in the south. There was originally a belt of posts pre-Second World War. After the Zeppelin raids in the First World War, there was a need for air defence. So Cuckfield was one of the very first posts to be established as an aircraft spotting post. 1925, or you can see on the picture there, you've put 1925, one of the earlier posts to be established. The aircraft spotting post and the little fallout room, as you might call it, or the nuclear bunker underground, that's the aircraft post just there. They're actually in the same field that they were right in 1925, because some of them some of the posts had an aircraft spotting post, and then the nuclear post was built some distance away from the site of the post. But ours was all within the same field, so quite lucky. Long continuous history of the observer corps. It's called Observer Field at Cuckfield, and has been for decades and decades. So closed in 1991. The fallout post, the bunker, the ROC post, lots of different names for them. Closed in 1991. It was a master post upon closure. It wasn't originally a master post, but it closed first of all in the '68 closure round.
I see it was Portadown. Portadown closed in '68 too.
Yeah, and then there was another local post, Ditchling Post, just had insolvable flooding problems. So they recommissioned Cuckfield in the very, very early '70s. So it was closed for a couple of years. And then it was operational until 1991, stood down, as with the rest of the corps, around about then. Sat derelict, but the council knew what it was. The council are the landowner. Mark and I are tenants. We look after it and caretake it on their behalf.
So when did you start the restoration?
2009. I remember it being quite cold. The post was in good order, structurally sound. No big cracks. Didn't have huge amounts of water leaks on it. A little bit of water coming around the hatch, that sort of thing. But very grubby, very dirty inside. Rotten wood on the floor, all the woodwork around the doorways and all that sort of stuff was in pretty poor state. Mold problem because all the vents had been shut and blocked up. So it took a good most of that winter, odd weekends, and then a lot of the spring the following year, spring 2010, to get it all up to shape, get it all aired out, dried out, cleaned. We had our first open day, early spring, mid-spring, I think it was, 2010, which is unbelievably a decade ago, when Mark and it was Mark's brainchild to start with to restore a post, really, and I joined him shortly after he found the post and took it on. Mark and I have been friends for years before this. We're members of an organisation, Subterranea Britannica, so studies man-made underground spaces, and I met Mark through that organisation years ago. And so Cuckfield was a collaboration with him and the local council. We thought we might get 3 or 4 years worth of visits out of it, and then it would kind of die off and people wouldn't be that interested. We also didn't think we'd be able to get as much equipment as we've been able to find and been given and been loaned and been fortunate enough to purchase, and through meeting people like you through the sort of network of ROC enthusiasts, as it were, historians, preservers, whatever people want to describe us as.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I first started, I started very, very similar time to you, and again, back then I think there only was 6 maybe proper museums which were open, obviously the network was very, very small then. I wasn't even on Facebook, so I wasn't, and then the amount of groups that sort of started up after that to help each other, and I think that's one of the good things about it now, is there are so many of us that are active and collaborate with each other and will go out and help other people.
Certainly. I mean, when I started, I was heavily inspired, I suppose, both of us were, by what Frank was doing up at his post in Scotland, what Cheryl was doing, what Lawrence, who is a former corps member himself, was doing down in Cornwall. And those are posts that have been open, probably 20 years plus. They've been open very quickly after stand down. They were sort of restored and opened. I don't know the exact dates of them, but I was very influenced, both of us were, and it's sort of inspired by what they'd done. And we knew that it is a thing. There was no other ones restored down in our neck of the woods, down on the south coast. So
very similar. Frank, Frank was he was my inspiration to do my post. I went over for one of him, took the ferry over. And he's in the Skelmerley, over in west coast of Scotland, and I took the ferry over one day to Troon, and then drove up to him and just helped about on the day. Met another post restorer, a guy called Graham Finlayson, who I don't think he has his post anymore, but at the time I was sort of got reasonably friendly with him.
Was it Gilbert Field post?
That was it. Yeah,
yes,
that was it.
Yeah.
And got pretty friendly with him, and then once I'd seen what Frank had done, I then tried to bring that back and do the same thing at Portadown. But I think the oldest restored post in the whole of the UK is West Harptree in
Yeah,
Somerset.
down in Somerset. Yeah.
Apparently, I said to them, I was on holiday in Somerset, and I went over to see them, as I think quite a few of us do when we're away on holiday somewhere.
Yeah.
We go and visit a bunker.
Yeah. What's the nearest one to visit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So West Hartree, I said to the guy there who restored it, when did you open the post after restoration? And he says the day after stand down.
Yeah. Which is
So
astounding, really. They
yeah,
had
he
all
literally
time-
just took the post on the day after they were officially
Yeah.
stood down, and that the post has been open every summer since then, which has been incredible.
Oh, absolutely. And you think the foresight back then, I mean, I could understand their bitterness if they'd have just closed the post up and walked away. And
Yeah,
I imagine
totally.
they had some challenges with, we've got hold of, you and I and, Gavin up at Dundee and whatnot, we've got hold of bits and pieces of equipment that we've been given by former reservists, things forgotten in people's loft and from other collectors and so on. But
Yeah.
that's okay nowadays. We're purchasing those or being given them or loaned them or whatever. But back then, the day after stand down, and it was expected that equipment would be returned. It was still Home Office property. And so, the challenges they would have had to overcome compared to what we've had to do. We think it's difficult finding equipment now, but back then it was probably difficult holding on to equipment and dealing with the bitterness of not having, an organisation.
Yeah, and it's again, if you think
So-
about it, for such I mean, in the terms of UK Defence Forces, it was a reasonably small organisation. But just look at the amount of equipment that has actually survived.
Oh, yeah, lots.
At the very start when we were getting stuff, items like the ground zero indicator and the bomb power indicator would only turn up on eBay once a year, if that. And now, if you want one, yes, you will have to pay big money for one, but you can get one if you
You
want
can
one.
get one, yeah. Yeah.
And talking about rare equipment, you got something which is extremely rare a couple of weeks ago, and I'll put a
Yeah.
photograph up on it now. And there we have it.
Yeah, there you go. Now that's how we've installed it in the post. That's how they would have been installed. That's a really interesting piece of equipment. Sort of in the early 80s, the Observer Corps started to look at, or the Royal Observer Corps, their proper title, started to look at air filtration in the posts. Because as you know, the posts weren't equipped with any sort of air filtration. You had sliding baffles, and that was about it, really. There was no consideration to filtering the air in any way. So early 80s, I think I've seen an SOP dated 1982, I think, something like that anyway. And certainly the kit that Mark and I have been given, he's got an 81 or 82 date on it, manufacture date. So around then anyway. Interesting piece of equipment. It was given to us by a former observer, whose name is John, from 2 Group. The provenance of the piece, it comes from a post within 2 Group that's demolished, but at stand down, the chief observer, I think it was the chief observer, I can't remember what John told me, it was either the chief observer or the observer officer, said, you know what, these things are important. All of you take one piece of equipment and keep it, because one day this will be interesting historically and should be preserved. So he had the filtration system, complete set with the mounts and everything, and he took it home and he kept it in his garage, and it was in his garage for 30 odd years. The gentleman's now emigrated to warmer climates, lucky guy. And he contacted me via the Facebook page, actually, to say, I've got this, I'm basically clearing my house, and if you don't come and get it, I'm going to weigh it in. So I literally drove over the following weekend, contacted him, drove over the following weekend, picked it up the day before he flew out to Rhodes.
Good grief.
And he said, no, you can keep it. We've got, I've sticking it up on the back so we know where it came from. And he just wanted to see it, for the public to be installed in the post. So I've installed it as it would have been originally. The only difference, modern concession is made, is that the equipment wasn't originally fitted to Cuckfield post.
Okay.
So we fitted it. The only damage to the post we've done is 3 holes in the wall to mount the unit on, which we had to do for safety, so it doesn't fall off on people. It's too heavy to just support with cord or anything like that. But the whole lot's removable. I've made some rotational mounts and some magnet mounts, so we can put it on the wall for the open days. People can see it. They can crank the handle. They can get the airflow going around. And then I can remove it. I was worried about leaving it over the winter where it might get a bit damp. I didn't want it to get rusty and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So we can take it all out, and it's, we haven't made any.
And what
damage
way
to the post, as it
would
were.
the observers, how would they have used that then during in both peacetime and wartime?
Okay, so peacetime was fairly straightforward. The vent at the top, you can see at the very top of that picture above the green earthing straps, that's a combined intake and blast valve, and it blocks the original vent. So it would block the airflow unless you were pumping the handle on the fan. So in peacetime, you would disconnect the black rubber hose from it so the air could just flow freely in and out of that vent. In war, if you were just on exercise and you're in the post, not in a wartime situation, you would just connect the black rubber hose directly to the back of the filter. Sorry, not the filter, the round fan unit, which is the white and round thing at the bottom with the silver bit sticking out on top of it. You just connect it to that and you turn the handle on that for 15 minutes every hour to just draw in fresh air, straight unfiltered fresh air from outside. That was if you're doing an exercise, 24-hour exercise at the weekend. That would be when you'd use that. In a proper wartime or a fallout situation, the black hose splits into two, and one half of it would go to the underneath of the grey canister that you can just see between the two, the vent and the air handling fan unit.
Yeah.
The black hose would connect to the bottom, and the other half of it would connect to the top. And then when you turn the handle to draw the air in, it would come in the top through the air vent, down into the canister, which is a HEPA filter with a activated charcoal portion in it as well. So that would physical filter, HEPA filter, physical filter, but then the charcoal, activated charcoal for any airborne contaminants. And then it would go out the fan unit and circulate around the room. So 15 minutes for every hour.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an interesting piece of equipment. And I mean, I wonder, obviously, as the paperwork you said you'd find there, sort of dates it about 10 years before the Royal Observer Corps was stood down. And I was wondering then, I mean, I was always under the impression that these weren't fitted to posts until the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah. And that was what I thought as well. I've read about these. I've seen pictures of them in the Dalton book, which is very good. I've seen there's various examples around the place. They're known to exist. There's one at New Haven Fort. I think there's one at Sywell Aviation Museum, Hack Green, perhaps. I can't remember where the other one is. Frank's got one on display in his post, although I don't know if he's got his installed or if it's just on display on the bunks or something. I can't remember. So they're around.
I'm pretty sure it's on display. I'm pretty sure he has it fitted. Pretty sure he does. Most of it anyway.
Okay, cool. So I had just assumed, because there isn't that much information out there, even if you talk to Neville at the ROC archive, he's got limited information on it. And I've tried to chase down through Lua in the UK, and when they've been sold and bought out so many times since the 90s that there's no one there to ask. And they don't have an archive. I've tried to contact the Swiss, I think it is, side of it, and Air, and they same story. So I've not been able to track anything from the manufacturer's side of things, from an archival point of view, like we were lucky enough to do with the Avo meters. Yeah. They're bought out by Mega, and they still had the archive and sent us some fantastic technical drawings. So I was hoping for something like that, but no, we haven't. So really, all we've got is a couple of bits of paperwork from which Frank found, I think, quite early on, or perhaps during his time in the Corps, perhaps, which is the manufacturer's operational instructions, and then an SOP, single-page SOP, written by the Bentley Priory HQ ROC on peacetime use when the post's not in use, and wartime filtered use and how to use it. But other than that, we've not been able to find, not through lack of trying, any further information about exactly where they were, when they were put in, who brought it about, what post it went to. We know that it was at Cranley Post on Dunsfold Aerodrome in Group 2, Red Hill Post, which is where that set came from, incidentally. Joppa, I don't know if I'm saying that right, it's a Scottish post. I think there was one at Horsham Post. I think there was about 8 posts. I think there's a list of about 8 posts that we know had it fitted, because there's evidence either still on the walls or there's photos from when it was occupation, in use, as it were, operational. But we don't know, was there a couple in every group? I don't know. I think if
Northern Ireland definitely didn't get them.
No, I think we'd see more evidence of it in the post. It leaves quite a distinctive triangular mark on the wall.
Yeah.
The vent is modified. If it was fitted, a couple in every single group, what is there, 31 groups in total by the stand down?
Well, yeah, give or take. Yeah.
Give or take, yeah.
Yeah.
we would, the posts have been thoroughly documented. We would have seen some evidence in other posts of it being fitted. So I think it was only fitted to a very limited number.
So it's probably one of the rarest pieces of equipment then?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I think so. It's an interesting piece of equipment because it shows how, the early 80s, which was ages before the Observer Corps, it was even on the horizon that they would be stood down suddenly. They were still thinking about the next step. What can we do to improve these? We're thinking long term. So I'm just surprised that it was introduced in sort of the early 80s and then or it was introduced as a trial. It wasn't standard equipment.
Yeah.
And then
same as the Yamaha petrol electric generators.
Yes.
Yeah, they were a trial.
Exactly.
They weren't an official equipment. Either.
No, exactly. But then by stand down, it hadn't been rolled out. Maybe the trial failed, or it pointed that it wasn't good enough, or they just didn't need it. I don't know. We haven't found any paperwork for the results of the trial.
Yeah, because it seems to be the rarer the item, the less paperwork there is for it. Because obviously, with the maroons, I contacted what is now Payne's Wessex. There is still a Payne's Wessex fireworks company, but they are nothing to do with Payne's Wessex. They just bought the name. And the company that now owns what was the Payne's Wessex factory now makes electronic countermeasures for aircraft. So when I contacted them, there was one guy that worked on the project that was able to talk to me, but there was no paperwork. There was nothing.
Yeah.
So
which is a story. I think we're looking for things that were a minimum of 30 odd years ago now.
Yeah.
And most cases when they brought the maroons and stuff in, we're talking nearer 40 years ago. And back then, it's different times now. Back then, things just weren't digitized. Companies have changed hands, gone out of business, and stuff like that's just been dumped. Or, there might be more stuff in obscure archives that will crop up, like the things we got from Mega Limited. But that was a rarity, to be honest with you.
That was. You just happened to get in contact. They just happened to have a guy, that that was his job, and that's what he was doing, and you were able to help him out with some kit for their museum. So it all worked out really well.
Of bits they've made in the 50s that I don't know what they did with them in the end. I think they've got them on display in the atrium to their new headquarters, and it's a pretty nice thing to do.
Yeah, and
talking to maroons.
Yes,
you remember I lent you, or you borrowed a maroon. Have you got that? Can I have it back?
It is sitting here somewhere. There it is. It's here. This one.
Yeah, that's the kitty. Yeah, hand it.
Right. Okay. Well, if I give that back to you, then do you want to talk a bit about the maroons? Because I'm sure people don't really know what maroons are.
We can do very. I mean, I think, to be honest with you, you've done an excellent video on the maroons in the past, haven't you? You probably know a bit more. We can just banter backwards and forward a couple of questions, but hand it over.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Put that to one side. I mean, I didn't need it because you've not got open days this year, but it's nice to have it back. So anyway, but maroons are quite a nice piece of equipment. Again, they're a bit of a rarity as well. Lucky to get hold of those. There was some recovered from the Channel Islands in their civil defence store a little while back. Because again, those were something that stand under the Corps. They weren't actually kept in the ROC posts when they were operational. They were kept in HQ or local police, and they were classed as they're a explosive device. They were destroyed. They were all taken back in and destroyed. So to get then they're disarmed or fired, however you want to put it, deactivated versions. 30 years after they were supposed to have been destroyed was incredible. But they're for warning of fallout.
Fallout, yes,
approach
correct.
of fallout. That's it.
So
it's 3 rockets.
Big long cable that will connect to a battery. Now you can do a 9-volt battery, you can do a 12-volt battery, and then the cable can go above ground, down inside, underground into the post, and then you can set them off. So it's pretty cool. Right, okay, we'll move on from talking about posts. You are involved with a pretty incredible, I won't say a restoration project because you're not really restoring it, but I've been over once and I obviously follow the progress on Facebook. But with RAF Wartling, which is an old rotor radar station from the Cold War, and it obviously has a even bigger history going back to the Second World War as well. Would you like to talk a little bit about rotor in general, and then also about Wartling then as well?
So rotor is an enormous topic that we just can't do justice, but in a short period of time. But essentially, radar in its infancy, Second World War, we relied on the observer corps for eyes and ears on the ground and aircraft spotters and all the rest of it. End of the Second World War, radar had got a bit better. And by the time we got into the 50s, late 40s, Cold War era, radar was good. We could see a couple hundred miles off of our coast, but vulnerable. The electronics were vulnerable. So a big program of building underground radar well, not all of them were underground. Some of them, like Bishop's Court over your way, we went and looked at. Which
yes, I have a photograph of. I have a photograph of that here. Yeah, which I'll pop over.
That's it. Yeah, so that's exactly the same type of radar that would have been at Wartling. But all of those buildings you can see would have been underground at Wartling, whereas at Bishop's Court, less of a risk area would have been. There's a height finder, that nodding one in the foreground. Nice Land Rover there and a IFF tower in the background. What
it looks like today.
So, yeah, a little bit different, but still recognisable as a site. So that's a really good example of a above-ground rotor GCI site, and which, of course, Wartling was a GCI site, ground control intercept, so it had the authority to scramble aircraft and control them onto the intercept for the incoming Russian or whoever bombers coming to attack the mainland UK, because this was before the missile era. This was when we were flying bombers and dropping freefall nukes or atom bombs. So built these huge bunkers mainly to keep the equipment in underground or above ground, like we just saw. Wartling was one of them. Big rejig of radar in the UK in, I think it was the late 60s, early 70s. I think Wartling was put on care and maintenance. It just wasn't needed, and its role got handed over to Bawdsey, I believe, which took on a bigger role of looking at more of the country rather than it being split into areas. I think it was late 70s. It was taken off care and maintenance, and it returned back to the landowner, which is a farmer down in East Sussex. He's very interested in the history of it, and about must have been 15 plus years ago now, he was gracious enough to allow us to enter the bunker, survey it. It's a 2-level underground space, and it had flooded because basically the RAF decommissioning crew did a total hack job. And to demolish some of the surface structures, they just bulldozed them and pushed them down the shaft and poured dry mix cement on top, which is never going to be watertight. And the groundwater just poured in.
And obviously those sites would have had pumps running all the time, wouldn't they? Anyway,
down in the plant room, there's a sump. The lowest point of the bunker, there's a sump with a pump on a float switch. So it would, because a structure that size, you can't stop the water coming in. The only thing you can really do is manage the water that does come in to stop it damaging things. Anyway, so the farmer was gracious enough, and the Environment Agency and whatnot gave us a license. We discharged, I think it was something like 3.5 million litres of water out onto the Pevensey levels.
That is incredible.
Over the next 8 or 9 years, a programme of works to not restore the site. The site is too gone, and part of its charm is its derelict.
Yeah, and there's a couple of photographs.
You can see the tide mark on the wall that shows you how high the water came. This is the lower level. This is underneath the Kelvin Hughes plotter. I'm the guy in the orange jumpsuit, and some of my Wartling colleagues. And this is when we were doing remedial works to prop up the Kelvin Hughes to stop it collapsing into the void below it.
Okay.
We were fitting in some supports off the steel girders. But you can see the water level at points is probably another 3 foot above everybody's head. So a significant volume of water that we've pumped out. And what we're slowly doing is clearing out each individual room, searching for artifacts. We're getting rid of organic matter, rotten wood, basically.
And you're repairing. You're replacing safety things as well. Like this is a new staircase you put in, obviously for the only entrance and egress point of the entire bunker. So it obviously has to be safe.
Yep. Which was something we had to do as part of the agreement with English Heritage, because they come and show people around. Obviously not this year, but last year we had a couple of tours for members only. Really successful. So we've done quite a bit of safety work, covering voids, making new rails, making walkways into rooms, because all the teak flooring has been robbed out over the years. So we've made a lot more safe access, but without ruining the charm of the site. And the new things we've put in, we've made them deliberately look new, so they obviously can't be mistaken for original fittings. However, this stairway that we've put in, we copied the measurements. The old one we had to take out. It was failing at the mount points on the walls and the feet, and it would have collapsed. So we took it out And the stairway that we put in is a replica of, although this using modern materials, galvanized fittings and things like this.
Oh, that's
Again, to safeguard access, that's a 50-year fix, those stairs.
Yeah.
They'll last 50, 60, 70 years. So,
excellent. And then I've got a photograph here. The building that I find most, or the room that I find most impressive is obviously the ops room, the main operations room. And to give people a sense of sort of what 30 or 40 years of being underwater does to a building. This is what Wartling sort of would originally have looked like.
That's what it would have looked like. Yep.
And
that's exactly what it would have looked like.
I think people should pay attention to obviously the big tote board in the background.
So look at the posts on the tote board, and the bottom of the tote board is your reference points for when you see the main ops room.
Now this image is taken. This image is taken from the left of the room, looking to the right. This image is taken from the right of the room to the left. So that's the
you can
what
see
Wartling looks like now.
Yeah, very different. But this is the reason we decided to do some of these preservation works, is because it was put on care and maintenance and mothballed quite early in the Cold War, really, in the late 60s. Peak of the Cold War, really. We still had quite a lot of decades of change to come. It remained unmodified. A lot of these ones got turned over. So Bordsey, for instance, the ops room was floored over because it's a huge space, and modern equipment just doesn't need that volume of space to have a plotting table in it anymore. So a lot of them, the R3s, of which this is one of them, Wartling, were modified by having the ops room floored over and all the original partitions. They're just stud walling were taken out, rooms were reconfigured and all the rest of it. Mm-hmm. So Wartling is unique in that it is the only R3 arguably in the world, although there were a couple in Germany, but I don't know what their internal layout and state is like. But certainly it's the only one in the UK in its original as-built 1950s rotor layout, which might not sound that interesting to most people, and granted it's a bit of a niche subject, but for us and Cold War historians and people that have an interest in 20th century radar and aircraft and that sort of things, it's actually quite unique in that it didn't get changed during the course of its lifetime from its original as-built, as-designed specification. So we can still follow around all of the original air ducting, the original water routes, the original... Oh, all right, the wiring's not in it anymore, but a lot of the ducting and conduits and all that sort of stuff is there. So the possibilities for studying the site to learn how an R3 functioned in the 1950s as a radar building, is possible.
It's a good place. It's a good place to spend a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah,
getting dirty and
repeatedly polishing bits of muddy rubbish.
You'd mentioned very briefly there about Germany. You have been in what was obviously former East Germany quite a few times, and you have a story which you told me a couple of years ago now, which I think is fantastic, talking about abandoned bunkers. Now, the photograph I'm going to put up is not a photograph of the bunker you're going to tell a story about, but it gives a good, I think, look for people to what bunkers in East Germany made by the Russians looked like. So I'll pop that on the screen now.
Certainly different to the bunkers.
Yeah, like how many blast doors is there in that photograph? One,
one, two,
four,
three,
at least four.
4, 5. Every one of those hatched things is a blast door. So
Good
1,
grief.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at least 8 that you can see there.
That's
mainly airlocks, just for entry in and out of the decontamination area. This was a radar bunker, East German Army radar transmitter. It was the hall where they had all the transmitters, but actually all the aerials were located miles and miles away. But it just shows you the bunkers in the UK are very different.
Yeah, just a bit.
To the bunkers in East Germany, which was, East Germany, West Germany, the inner German border. That literally was the sharp end of the spear of the Cold War in Europe. It really was. You had American troops on one side of a border, and you had Russian and communist troops literally the other side of a barrack, checkpoint Charlie, separated east from west by a lift up arm and so it was absolutely right at the sharp end. So whereas back in the UK, a couple of thousand miles away or whatever it would be, I don't know what the journey time is to Berlin, but it's a long drive, trust me. It's a bit more disconnected, so perhaps the bunkers weren't quite as. And
there's so many bunkers over there that quite a few of them sort of just get forgotten about, and
totally.
Maybe the locals know about it, but I mean, I think one of the ones you found. You're one thing I found with you and the amount of places we have visited, obviously with Bishop's Court and a few other sort of decommissioned sites over here, RAF Ballykelly, for instance. You like pushing buttons.
Oh, I'm a fiddler. I love fiddling. Pushing buttons.
You love pushing buttons and turning things. Yeah. And so tell the story about the bunker then that you found then in East Germany.
So this was I think the designation is 7001, the Volkspolizei, so the People's Police headquarters bunker. I couldn't tell you where it was in Germany. I just drove to a map pin. And it's a series of bunkers. There's 3 or 4 of them for each different, I presume it would be like traffic and I don't know, whatever. But there's 3 or 4 of them all joined together by corridors. And we started in one end, poking around in the dark. I had a camera on a tripod. I was doing light painting, using torches to get around. And we got to maybe the second or third. It was basically, imagine it as an M shape, but with an extra leg on it. That's how the bunkers were laid out. And we got to maybe the second or third one, which had the central plant room for all of them. So they were split into different bits, were in different arms of the bunker. And as I do, I everywhere I go, I pull light switches, push buttons, twist things, just to see what happens. One day I'll get electrocuted, but well, I nearly did here. Anyway, so standing in the plant room of this thing, and there's a big buttons for the fans in the plant room. And I was like, well, what's going to happen? Hit the button. There was nothing for a split second. Then there was a click, which must have been a solenoid or something. I don't really know. A click, and then I heard the fans go. And obviously, this place has not been used since the fall of the Berlin Wall, essentially. 89, 90, 91, something like that. And of course, there's 25 years of dust and dead spiders and rubbish and it all came howling out. And we could feel the overpressure. Yeah. So that was a bit of a wake up. But more interestingly, we found that quite a lot of the lights still work. So we didn't have to use our torches to light paint for our photos anymore. We could just turn the lights on in the rooms. So that was great. I mean, God knows where it's drawing the power from.
That is incredible.
But in the middle of nowhere, genuinely, middle of nowhere, in the middle of a forest, Germany's a huge place and there's a lot of bits that are in the middle of nowhere. And this place still had power 25 years after it was closed. So it was...
Yeah, it's one place. It's one place I want to go to. It's one place I definitely want to go to. That Chernobyl. Yep. I want to go to. Speaking of places to go to, obviously Guernsey as well.
Definitely.
Because I'm able to see the messages here coming in on Facebook, and we've had a message from Phil, who we got the Maroons from.
Hi Phil.
And he just said about obviously their ROC posts and their bunkers were in reused German fortifications.
Yeah.
So
love to see one of those.
Yes, really would go over. So, but it's been great. It's actually quite nice. This new software which I have to do these streams, it's quite nice how it's integrated into Facebook.
It works really well.
Yeah, but listen, that's 40 minutes now we have been talking for. I am sure we could talk for probably another 40 minutes.
As we normally do. What was our test run? Hour and a quarter last week?
Yeah, it was, it was, yeah. But I'll try to limit these to probably 45 minutes, I think, in the sort of the series. I'll definitely have you back on.
Okay.
Because I think it would be good to talk about maybe in more detail some of the ROC equipment.
Yeah, of course.
And we can do demonstrations of them. Maybe one we can maybe do from Cuckfield, and I can maybe do from Portadown. Yep. So we can do wee things like that. But listen, thank you very much for joining me for my first episode, and I'll definitely speak to you again soon.
Yeah, look after yourself, Al. And
all right, mate.
I'll catch you soon. Take care.
Okay, see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, folks, that was Ed Coombs from Cuckfield ROC Monitoring Post Museum in West Sussex. Brilliant that he was able to come on in my first stream. If you found this interesting, please click like on it and share it with your friends. I am going to try to do as many as possible and bring in as many people as possible to be interviewed. Hopefully next time it will be Gavin Saxby, who is the main man at the 28 group observed in Dundee, and he and quite a large group of people are restoring the former 28 group ROC headquarters in Dundee, and that also incorporated the Caledonian sector headquarters as well for the Royal Observer Corps. So it's a fairly substantial bunker. much bigger than an ROC post, and he's been restoring that along with another group of people for quite some time now. So it'll be great to have Gavin on, and he can talk basically a bit about the restoration and how it's coming along. And unfortunately, due to the pandemic, there hasn't been much happening with it this year, but fingers crossed, as soon as things get slightly back to normal, it can go full steam ahead. If you enjoyed this stream, please think about donating. It means that I can make things better. I can bring in better pieces of equipment. I can also hopefully get a few more bits and pieces for Portadown. So when we do reopen again, I can make it COVID compliant. So any donations at all would be greatly appreciated, and you can do that through the paypal.me link there above. I also have a YouTube channel at NI Bunker, and if you go there, I have loads of videos about bunkers, about Geiger counters, and about radiation, and it would be really appreciated if you'd pop over there and have a look at those videos as well. But listen, folks, thank you very, very much for watching, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye bye.